It was only in the Middle Ages that the exchange of metallic coins minted in different cities began in the trade center of Italy. A definite correlation of currencies was gradually introduced in exchange practice according to their intrinsic value or precious metal content or the parity, and possibly also according to a rate based on the demand and supply. Shops of exchanges also began to discharge functions which remotely resemble the operations of contemporary banks, namely transfer operations. This was done in a very simple way. If a merchant had to buy goods in another city but did not want to take the risk of carrying on his person a considerable sum in coins, exchangers in the different cities who maintained regular contact came to his aid for a set fee. The merchant turned over to the local exchanger the money in coin and received a receipt, and on his arrival at the other city he was paid the sum indicated on the receipt in another exchange shop. At this payment for the goods purchased was made directly by this receipt, especially if the seller himself wanted to travel and buy goods in the city where the exchanger who had issued the original receipt had his office. Thus, the receipt to some extent performed the function of credit money, which became widespread under capitalism. But just as the exchange shops themselves only remotely resembled banks under capitalism, the receipts issued by these offices can only vaguely be considered as a prototype of the modern banknotes. The progress of money circulation observed in the Middle Ages in Italian trading centers was the exception under the conditions of feudal stagnation in terms of money circulation prevailing in the rest of feudal Europe. Under feudalism, the fragmented economy engendered a corresponding proliferation in money circulation. Many feudal lords issued their own money, which often had only a limited circulation within the bounds of particular feud. The feudal rulers were not bound by any rigid rules in coinage, and if such rules were established for a certain time, they were often violated, which greatly hindered trade. The situation changes for the better only when centralized feudal monarchies arose through the forcible elimination of feudal fragmentation, since they had an interest in the development of trade. Such monarchies not only protected merchant trade, but also sought to normalize money circulation, organized minting offices, and so on. In these, they were supported by the merchants and the artisans of the feudal towns. The feudal towns were the mainstay of a stable money circulation. Indeed, in the Middle Ages, the development of towns inhabited primarily by artisans and merchants reached a high level, and the circulation of commodities on the basis of metallic money took on a large scale and improved forms. The need to exchange the coins of one country for those of another, on the one hand, introduced into international trade the practice of settlements in precious metal bullion, and, on the other, developed the money exchange business and improved its forms. The individual exchanges were replaced by exchange offices whose connections extended beyond the bounds of their own countries. More frequent use was made of bills or receipts from exchange offices. The exchange of different coins according to a parity and rate was improved. The exchange business was gradually combined with the cash operations, which the exchange offices performed on the instructions of their regular clients, the merchants. And lastly, more powerful institutions appeared which operated on the basis of definite statutes, such as the Amsterdam Exchange Bank in 1609 and similar banks in Venice, Genoa, Stockholm, and Hamburg. But the operation of these banks was too based on metallic money circulation, which depended on the financial policy of the state authority. This authority, particularly as feudal monarchies gained in strength, could either normalize or derange the money system. The latter happens during wars and financial difficulties resulting from other causes. This was done, as before, by deliberately debasing money, reducing its weight, and decreasing the content of the precious metal in coins. Although in this way resources were temporarily obtained for waging wars and covering the expenses of the court. Eventually, the debasement of coins threw the money circulation into disarray, and after a certain time, order had to be restored. Most frequently, this was done with help of onerous taxes and levies. When a state allowed the payment of taxes with non-full value coins, it could imperceptibly reduce the amount of them in circulation. An equilibrium was achieved even when non-full value coins remained in circulation, if this was required by the needs of commodity turnover. Thus, the conclusion was gradually drawn that a certain quantity of coins as tokens of value, although they were not of full value, was necessary for the exchange of full value money of higher denominations. Such exchange money of small denomination has been preserved in the local trade of all countries up to the present. The circulation of non-full value metallic money led to the idea of using money made of another material, the paper money. And nevertheless, metallic money circulation in the form of coins was the main type in Europe up to the epoch of disintegration of feudalism and the emergence of capitalism, the epoch of the spread of colonial conquest and the expansion of world trade.